2020. 7/20/2020. That's a mouthful, isn't it? We're here to recap last week's show. I'm joined by my co-host Carlos Ponte, just outside of Mexico City.
Hi,
Hi,
Tulio.
Carlos. I am broadcasting from Los Angeles. We had three great shows last week. I'm going to try to recap them in 10 minutes. So we spoke with Reid Blackman, who's the founder and CEO of Virtue. We talked about operationalizing data and AI ethics. We spoke with uh, James Cohen, who
Yep.
is the CEO and co-founder of uh, Navon. Did I get that
Nevon.
right?
Yeah,
Navon.
it's Nevon.
And Nevon. And then which was talking about the journey to better care using technology. That was the health tech company we spoke of. And then we spoke with Sammy James, who is the founder and CEO of Speaks to Lead, about the Squiggly path to success. So I'm going to take real quick the conversation we had with Reid. I thought that was very interesting and an eye-opening to me, talking about AI and ethics and having a practice of appropriate ethics, especially if you're an AI-based company that's using algorithms to essentially parse out data and come up with recommendations. And I found it eye-opening because, quite often the mindset is, I have this technology that is going to look at patterns and look at behaviors, and you remove the ego from it or the human element from it, and the system's supposed to tell you which customers to focus on, which opportunities exist more than others based on historical trend, and make some predictions based on what's happening in the world. Unfortunately, sometimes those historical trends were skewed because of previous behavior, perhaps that weren't appropriate, i.e., women made less money than men many years ago. That's changing. That still hasn't fully changed. That's changing. So a system could determine, if you, especially in a hiring situation, that that someone who's applying, who's a woman, might be okay with less of an offer. I'm just using that as an example. And there are companies that have gotten in trouble with these kinds of algorithms and have had to correct them. Not that they did it nefariously on purpose, it just happened. So it brought awareness to the fact that if you're using data to make behavioral recommendations, then it might be a good idea to introduce ethics into not only your standard of practice as a business, but even in how you develop the product. You do stories, you do sprints, you do QA, build in there an ethics review to make sure that what's actually being done has some intelligence and keeps it fair for everyone involved. I thought that was very eye-opening to me, and something I learned from it that I didn't really think about before, and hopefully other people who listened to it got some insights for themselves. What about for you, Carlos? What show stood out for you the most?
The one, definitely the Squiggly Path to Success with Sammy James. Sammy James, I'm sorry. And it was funny because I kind of kind of relate to what James said when he said he would when we asked him what the next step would be when in building his company and building his tool would be to start all over again. Well, not literally all over again from scratch or from zero, but he reached the point after 10 years building his platform. He decided that it was just about time to reinvent himself and his own company. So in that sense, he's going to be starting all over again. And I said I relate to that because on the professional path, I kind of have the same thing happen to me personally. But what it takes to reinvent yourself, whether personally or building a company after 10 years, well, you don't really start from scratch. And I don't think Sammy started from scratch. I think the learned lessons that he was able to secure from himself in that 10-year period is going to be allow him to catapult his tool and his endeavors in a much shorter time. That's going to allow him to take speaks to leads to the next level, like in no time. And also, well, that's going to be also. I don't think that's an option because the way things are in the world, we need to think fast. We need to capitalize on all lessons learned, and what better than a whole decade to ponder what lessons you learned from building your company. So that's what stood out for me the most when speaking to Sammy about his journey building Speak to Leads, Julio.
Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing example of what grit is about, right? I
Yeah,
mean, talk
exactly.
about perseverance, having the courage to do something no one's ever done before,
Yeah,
changing the way an industry goes about managing leads. He spoke of personal experience and the frustration he had in insurance and in banking and how he wanted to solve that. So kudos to him for sticking with it and continuing to on this path. And it seems as though that's finally catching up with him. I guess it's true. If you stick with it something long enough, eventually you'll figure out how to make it work, and the market sometimes catch up with you. The
absolutely.
other, right? The other interview we had was with James Cohen of Nivon, and that was interesting to me because it's a healthcare company, but specifically they're providing services for the the at-home care for the elderly, and it's an international company, and they're providing how-to and tips and advice and knowledge for caretakers who are taking care of the elderly. And more importantly, with COVID, that's become a bigger challenge because there's a lot more that they have to be cautious about. And I found that what his company's doing is obviously very important and very useful. What stood out for me was that you only require 75 hours of training to become a home caregiver in the U.S. I thought that was very low, but it is what it is. And it's good to know that a platform like that exists to provide insights and training and knowledge that's necessary for taking better care of elderly, especially those who suffer from dementia or early Alzheimer's. And I like the idea that they make that available not just for practitioners but also for family members, because anyone who's had an elderly parent knows that even though you hire help and you get help, you probably need to learn certain things. Like, for example, those with dementia, they do things that mimic sometimes the behavior of, like, a toddler or someone going through the terrible twos, and you can't take that personal. It's the disease that's causing that. So learning those things, obviously education becomes really important for not only the caregivers, but those who are around those individuals that need to provide better care. So kudos to them for creating that business, very timely. And also, I love the fact that all these things are available remote. You don't have to go into a classroom. You don't have to go into a facility to take advantage of learning how to care for the elderly. Anything else that you can remember from the three interviews, Carlos? Something in particular that stood out for you?
Well, not really in particular, but well, in the case of James Cohen's interview from Navon, well, to me, it was more intriguing than anything else. The fact that um, it's when specifically when you already mentioned it right now, specifically about it's the disease that you're dealing with. It's not a person. So the best, I think it's challenging to not take it personally, even though no matter how many tech tools you might have at hand, there's always this human factor of being affected emotionally when you're having to deal with the elderly, and especially in a challenging situation like dementia or Alzheimer's, those kinds of difficult situations to deal with. It's very hard to it's very challenging, to say the least, not to take it personally. So I think the viewers who might be in the same situation, I think they should definitely try to make an effort and not take it personally, right? And just remember every time that that it's the disease that you're dealing with, not the person.
Yeah.
So don't forget about the human side of the equation.
Great advice. So we're up on time. What do we got coming up this week, Carlos? We're trying to do this in 10 minutes. We're keeping to it. We're just a few seconds away from that timeline. What do we got coming up this week?
Tomorrow, Lackland McDonald, principal of the Boston Consulting Group, a consulting firm. We don't have the topic yet, but Boston Consulting Group, it's a company that partners with leaders in business and society to tackle their most important challenges and capture the greatest opportunities. And on Thursday, we are going to be speaking with. Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. Forgot to put on my glasses. So we're going to be speaking with Gordy Hanrahan from Carrot, which is a platform to automatize, so to speak, the recruiting process, to make it automatic and the like. So he's going to be telling us all about his company, Carrot. I don't have the topic yet for any of the two shows, but please, folks, stay tuned for more right here on Dojo Live.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.